The thing that interests me is how, through history, with people like Martin Luther King and Gandhi, how civil disobedience and nonviolent protest has been an extremely effective tool for social change and political change. And I was wondering what you think integral protesting might look like.
There are really only about 2 cases where a nonviolent protest of the type of Martin Luther King or Gandhi has succeeded, and that's in cultures that have a center of gravity at Orange. And anything lower than that is a disaster. If Martin Luther King or Gandhi had tried it with the Nazis, they would have gotten rolled over by tanks happily, and it would have saved the Nazis a lot of bullets. So not too many people know that Aurobindo wrote scathing attacks on Gandhi. He had a very low opinion of him. And because he was, in a sense, latched on to a type of green meme, rigid version of nonviolence. And on the one hand, you can respect, obviously, what's not to respect about certain aspects of that. These were 2 extraordinary human beings. I believe Martin Luther King Jr. I think he was more flexible than a lot of that. I think he realized that if he was in Germany, he couldn't use those tactics. But that he realized that because there was a constitution that would support the tactics he was using, that in fact it's a very, very effective way to do it. But both of those 2 protests were against a British-American system that had a very high center of gravity. If you tried it anyplace else, it's a prescription for disaster. So how do you protest from second tier? Well, part of the things that's always so difficult about second tier, even when you start at yellow, is it's often described as chameleon. And what that means is, so you can spot somebody who's blue, or spot somebody who's red, or spot somebody who's orange or green. Sometimes even there's a uniform that, in particular cultures. Somebody that's green is, Patagonia and LL Bean and stuff like that. And even in spiral dynamics, Chris and Don say, but yellow, one day is wearing an Armani suit, the next day torn up jeans, one day is eating granola, the next day is eating McDonald's, one day is and people kind of can't figure them out, because what they're doing is they're fitting into a larger picture at any given moment, and they're doing what's appropriate at that moment. So there's no fixed, hard, rigid rule. Whereas if you take somebody who's really committed to the granola diet, and you throw them in northern Germany, they're all out of whack, because all they're going to get is pig intestines and meat. And they can starve to death while they're figuring out what they're supposed to do about this. So yellow can be very chameleon-like, and it can confuse first tier sometimes, because they'll often either think that they're being two-faced. Oh, well, I saw that person eat meat over here and eat vegetarian over here, but no, they're dressed to the hilt and their Seville suit over here, and then they're wearing jeans and beat up crap over here. So I kind of think that yellow people are being two-faced, but they're not. They're very consistently following this flex flow pattern that fits in with larger situations. So a protest movement, if you're yellow, is going to depend. If you're in a red country, you're going to have to do something that red is going to be able to hear. Lying down in front of red tanks, you're going to be red tank grease marks. And same with blue. If you're going to protest against blue, you have to adopt the principles that blue would understand, try to even couch it. Mm-hmm. If you're protesting biblical stuff, phrase it in biblical injunctions, at least work along lines like that, and so on. So it changes very, very dramatically. Whereas green is locked into just a very rigid thing that it's going to do with a kind of harump-harumphing, and the only thing that makes green protests not quite as consistent as you would think is a standard pre-post or pre-trans fallacy, which is whoever green protests, red comes and joins them. And so you get this really wild mixture of protest, that's just unbelievable. And green, keep in mind, green is a very high development. And if you actually look at the difference between orange and green, using those in a very loose sense, Claire Graves called orange multiplistic. And that sort of, people kind of, that confuses people a little bit because they tend to think of orange as kind of, universal science or something like that. But he called it multiplistic. The previous level, blue, he called absolutistic. Sometimes they call it saintly. So blue was absolutistic, orange was multiplistic, and green was relativistic. And so what happens there is you see increasing differentiation, integration. So this absolutistic view that all the world's fundamentalist religions have, there's one God and there's one book and there's 10 commandments, and if you break those, you're going to burn in hell forever. That's like, whoa, that's absolutistic. Not much room for movement there. The first thing formal operational cognition does, or orange, is it starts differentiating those systems. It breaks up that crusty topsoil into different types of systems. It recognizes that there are different ways to look at things. And that's what orange does.